The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Wonder-working power in the precious...
Incredible as they seem, are not the results of mass hysteria.
You may wish to adjust the dial you are currently tuned into.
The wrong station. Night. The scream of the gray drake woke him, and he staggered to his feet in damp darkness, fumbling numbly at the hilt of his sword. A wind was blowing. The night was starless with cloud. He stared up wildly. A ragged shape seemed to whip across the shrouded moon. But then the wind faded out, and all was silent, all still. Mists fell soundlessly to blacken trees and freeze upon the bare hills. His heart was a pounding iron in his chest.
Where are you?
His voice echoed over the empty wild, but no scream answered back. Nothing rushed down through the darkness toward him. He sank to crouch on the damp stone, the old rage boiling up in his throat, but he forced it down where it could do no harm. Then, when he had control again, he ran a hand across his face. He had been dreaming evil dreams. Day. He considered the river, the water swirling gray, the glacial chill shiversome from a stone's throw distance. On the far bank, dark pines ranged up into the hills. Beyond them, somewhere, lay the gray drake's lair. He had traveled some distance downstream to find a place where the swollen waters widened and shallowed and thundered through stone teeth into a deep pool below. He could cross here if he were brave enough, but he wasn't sure he was. He trusted his feet, but the rocks were slick, and there were places where you'd have to leap. He stood on the bank for a while, planning his line, and the rapid spittle licked his boots. Then he ventured out across the water, letting long legs carry him from stone to stone, throwing out his good arm for balance, and keeping the bad one closer to his chest. He was halfway across when the attack came. The water suddenly boiled, and when he looked down, something wrenched him off his feet and into the freezing water. He was gone. For a moment, all was peaceful at the river crossing. Then the water boiled again, and the young knight surfaced, gasping for air and lunging for the stones. The current threw him against them, and he caught hold with a bloodless hand. But that thing in the water seized him again. He fought. The current was with him, and he got a second hand on the rock. His grip was strong from long years of lance and sword and a long winter digging trenches in the mire. His bad shoulder screamed, but he kept himself above water, and with a pull against his legs, slackened for a moment. He kicked, and his foot caught something that felt like a jaw, and he ripped himself forward, gaining the safety of a wide, flat rock. He scrambled into a crouch and waited, breathing heavily, with the cold water streaming from his hair. For a heartbeat, he felt very good. He felt alive. Then the next attack erupted from the water, and he was ready. He caught the impact on his chest and yielded, letting the great force guide itself over the edge of the stone. Her body was huge and serpentine, scale and muscle only from the waist down, but her head and torso were human, and when he pinned her halfway over the precipice of the cataract, he shouted, "Stop, or I'll send us both over the edge." She bared her teeth and stared up with black eyes. He realized with a shock that she was afraid of him. He felt suddenly ashamed. A great will to violence had boiled up in his throat, and now he forced it down where it could do no harm, and loosened the pressure of his forearm on her sternum. "Who are you?" She angled up her chin. Her white teeth were sharp. Her black eyes blazed. "A monster." She spat the words in his face. "Why did you attack me?" She laughed. "Why shouldn't I?" He was aware of the heartbeat underneath her cold skin, the hard bareness of her chest beneath his arm. He stood back and away, with a ready hand on his sword. "Who was it?" he asked. "Your father or mother?" He meant, which of them was human? Her smile faded, and she rolled onto her front, pushing halfway back into the water. He didn't like how her black eye studied him. "Who was it for you?" When he didn't answer, she vanished back into the torrent. He waited for the next attack with sword-hand knuckles white. But none came, and carefully he stepped the next rock, and then the next. All was silent but for rushing water. He crossed to the last stone and then suddenly leapt for shore, rolling to his feet in a spray of pea gravel. But there had been no need. The river rolled on smoothly. With his footing firm, he allowed tense muscles to relax. "Let me cross in peace on my way back," he shouted. The river gave no answer, and so he backed away from shore and turned to climb the rocky slope which pitched up through the black pines. Then her voice called to him from behind, and he half turned to see her black hair and drowned white flesh rising from the torrent to her pubic bone. "What you looking for?" she shouted. "You'll find it up on Ithric Hill." She gestured with 2 fingers at the great sky beyond him, where one green peak loomed, fog-shrouded where it crouched behind the others. When he glanced back at the water, she was gone. The river ran on. Night. He slept cold and alone under high hilltops, wrapped in his heavy wool cloak under the shelter of a few angled pine boughs cut with his knife. He was hungry. In his loneliness, his mind turned to the Melusine, her nakedness, the hardness of her bare chest, and the thud of her heart beneath him. He turned his thoughts away again by force, unsettled that something in him should be drawn to a creature so murderous and strange. But his mind turned back, and he fell asleep, thinking of what her cold fingers would feel like in his hair. That night he was haunted by dreams again. He was tied to a stump in the silent wood as a dark figure crouched before him, smiling. He was drowning in the cold pool at Bittermere, unable to swim, with a shattered arm held close to his chest. He was standing under the cold eyes of the court at Pengalden, while the king passed judgment. He wanted to run. He wanted to fly. Then his dreams were all scale and coil, and black eyes and yellow eyes, and wind and cold. The great drake. He was close. He was flying beside it. Then its howling scream split the night wide open, so close that he could feel its echo in his teeth, and he was suddenly awake, staggering on the edge of a precipice. The night was full of its sound of wings. Day. Cold morning brought him down through slopes of gnarled oak, all emerald with moss, and then down along a valley walled with white pines. He cut window panes into the thickest trees he could find, and then peeled away the inner bark to chew on. It was bland but nutritious, and having something to chew tricked his body into thinking it was fed. In the afternoon he climbed the ramparts of the valley, up into gnarled and mossy oaklands once again, and a cold rain came in, starring the lanolin of his cloak and making him stumble. Black clouds boiled up at twilight. It was almost at the summit when they tore, and heavy rains lashed down upon the bare stone ahead. Suddenly he found himself trapped, the stones above too slick to scale, and the thin earth churning to mud below. He found a crack in the stone that he could cling to, and seeing the footing wash away, began to climb. But his bad arm gave out on him. Suddenly it wouldn't hold his weight, and he had to cling to the stone face one-handed as he waited for the waves of pain to pass. He was completely vulnerable. If the drake came now, he'd die. But then someone shouted from above. He couldn't hear them over the rain and thunder, but saw a dark figure silhouetted on the sky. He shouted something back, and his heart sank as the figure disappeared. But then it returned, and something vague tumbled down the face, and he seized hold of it, heart soaring as his fingers recognized the rasp of solid hemp. He gripped tight. The rope tautened as the figure up above took his weight. Then he pushed to his feet, half walking, half crawling up the sheer slope, until he reached the top and a strong hand pulled him over. He fell into wet grass, catching his breath. A long meadow sloped down toward more oaklands far below. Grass grazed short, and a small stone hut glowing from the windows as swine and goats and donkeys huddled in the shelter of a low stone fold. His rescuer shouted something, but all he could hear was the word, "Inside!" They ran together as lightning split the dark, and laughed with relief as they gained shelter. His rescuer, the swineherd, was a smallish, older man, yellow-haired and balding, with his skin leathered by a life outdoors. The knight clapped him on his shoulder as they entered together. "Thank you. I thought I was lost." "Not at all. Sit. Get as dry as you can." A bright fire was burning in the hearth. The air was close and odorous, and the quarters cramped. But the nearness of death and its escape had made them giddy and easy in one another's presence. "You're lucky," the swineherd said, stoking the fire. "I was out looking for one of my goats. I hoped she'd come home, but I guess the gray drake got her." He could all but hear the scream of the goat as yellow talons sheared her hide, as white fangs plunged themselves into bright hot blood. His mouth began to water. "I'm sorry to hear that." The swineherd gave him a sad smile. Wrinkles crinkled round his eyes. "Well, call it a lucky accident, or I'd have never heard you over the storm." He broke up a short stave of dry wood and fed it into the hearth. "And what about you? Who are you? How'd you come to be on my hillside in the rain?" "My name is Redgrain. I've come from Bittermere, hunting the gray drake." "Redgrain. My name is Foster. Well, I wondered when someone would come for that." "Yes, I'm told it makes its lair on Ithric Hill." "Ithric Hill? Been a while since I heard someone call it that. Do you know if it's true?" The older man shook his head. "Oh, I don't go that way often. Strange things, the nearer that you get. But first things first, I need to eat. Will you join me? All I have to offer is acorn porridge and a little bit of goat's milk." Redgrain accepted gladly. He was starving. The porridge was mealy and bland. It made his mouth feel slightly numb, and the milk was thin and sour. It was one of the best meals he'd ever eaten. "It's good. Good. This must be that chivalry I've heard so much about. Another bowl? If you can spare it. Always more acorns around here, and plenty of time to grind them." The porridge made a thick noise as he spooned it into a bowl. "But tell me, Redgrain, how is it that you're the one that came to kill the drake? Why you?" The young knight didn't answer for a moment. His mouth was full of wholesome mush. But when he swallowed, he set aside the bowl and leaned back into the worn hides piled against the stones. Then he frowned. Suddenly, he looked quite young. "It's my responsibility. I inherited the seat at Castle Bittermere last fall. I never expected it." The shepherd raised shaggy eyebrows. "That was you, then? The quest to the Valley of Black Ferns?" "Me." Redgrain looked out at the storm through a chink in the wall. "I was hoping to build something here. I've been digging all winter in the fence, the canal." He held out his hands, showing the calluses and black nails. "But everything's gone wrong since I arrived. The castle's full of refugees. There's too many mouths. The silver's running out, and the work's stalled. And Seaford Mavison's rattling his sword across the link-burn. And then the great drake." He tightened his eyes. The breath began to boil up in his throat. But he shoved the feelings down. Hardly seems fair, does it?" The swineherd put a battered kettle on the fire. "You must be angry." "Angry? No." He knew how to deal with anger. "I'm doing fine. I just need to get rid of the drake." The water began to boil. "You know, sometimes when I kill my swine, they're just afraid. They give up and let the knife come. And sometimes..." He poured hot water over dry mint in the bottom of a cup. It smoked. "They get angry with me. Well, I'd be angry too. They fight back, sometimes even break free and run off into the woods." He handed Redgrain the cup. "The way I see it, that anger is a gift." Redgrain looked down into its green depths. "Well, like I said, I'm fine." Night. He dreamed. He was tied to a stump in the still wood, and the grinning face of a dark figure bent low over him. And it was too hot, stifling under the trees, stifling in the small hut, and he needed to get out. A figure towered over him. It was Foster, but he was dressed in shining plate, and he snapped Redgrain's arm and thrust him down into the water so that he began to drown. He needed to get out of the hut. The drake was there inside with him, and it was stretching its membranes to fill the small space, and he shouted and charged for the door as it rolled its yellow eyes and screamed at him. Then he was outside running, his boots pounding the damp turf, while the grey drake howled and burst free behind him. And Foster shouted, and the pigs squealed and broke loose of their fold and charged wildly into the black wind. Then he slipped and landed in the entrails of a hog shredded by the grey drake's talons. And he moaned in terror, scrabbling to his feet all covered in gore and freezing rain. And he realized he wasn't dreaming anymore, and this was real. "Foster!" he shouted, ripping sword from sheath. "Foster!" But the night betrayed no sign of the man. when he took off running after Drake and fleeing swine, they were far gone already in the howling dark. Day. He ran down the misty forest. From time to time he heard distant shrieks that could have been the shrieks of hogs, or the shriek of the grey drake, and he followed as best he could through the mist and gloom. He still hoped to find Foster alive. The trees of this valley were thick, snarled and dark, and he saw nothing that lived save trees and moss and mold. Rain began to fall again. A lifeless glow suffused all things, and he supposed the sun had risen somewhere, far away. When the canopy broke, revealed a bleak sky, and the half-crowned bulk of Ithric Hill rising like a wave. "Foster!" His voice echoed dully through the trees, and finally he gave up his search and sank back against the bole of an oak, the rough texture against his spine. He thought it had been autumn the last time he had a full night's sleep. Then, suddenly, a rage took hold of him, boiling up so fast he almost choked. He was furious with himself for his failures, and with the Drake, and the people who relied on him at Bittermere. He was furious with Siegfried Mavison rattling his sword across the Linkburn, and he was furious with everyone who'd sent him on his quest to the Valley of Black Ferns, which had ruined him, broken him, stripped his humanity away, leaving... He caught hold of the fury. It had never been so difficult to force down. It struggled in his grip like a snake, but he squeezed. He was not a pig. Anger was no gift to him. He was not like the Melusine, half-human and given over to monstrousness and living in the wilds off human flesh. He was a better class of thing than that. He had control. He had so much control that when he finally forced the anger down, he didn't feel anything at all. Not even a trace. That was when the pigs came. Suddenly the forest floor rumbled, and hogs streamed forth from the undergrowth. Some were the fresh pink swine of Foster's clothes, others wild and feral, shaggy and gnarled, with bristles and tusks and old scars. Their eyes rolled wild with terror and rage as they stampeded through the forest. He leaped up as they whipped past, and bounded uphill through last autumn's leaves to keep from being trampled. For a moment he stood above a tide of hogs, and wondered what had caused the stampede. Then he saw a great boar emerge from the mists. It was man-high at the shoulder, golden bristled, gutting tusks a dull yellow stained with ancient gore. It stopped to stare at him across the glade like an old enemy. Its black eyes were sheened with crimson, as if with oil. He wondered what had brought it here. Then it raised its tusks, let loose a hoarse bellow, and charged for him. He fled uphill as it thundered after through the woods, lurching from tree to tree, pulling himself up the steepest parts of the slope, clawing at wet rock and handfuls of root, while frenzied hogs churned around the base of the slope, and their golden prints bombed up through freezing mud and rotten leaves, barely slowing as it reached the incline. He clambered a sheer dirt face as the boar's huge gut muscles launched it airborne. A tusk slashed his cloak, almost ripping him from the cliff face, but he held tight as the creature howled and fell back and tumbled down the slope. He gained the summit and sprinted across a wild heath, heart pounding, hearing the rush of swine through the bracken of the slope behind. But there was another sound now, a baying of dogs in the woods ahead. And as he stopped in the middle of the heath with sword in hand, white dogs poured forth from the upward slope and met the golden boar as it charged from below. The blood came instantly. 2, then 3 of the dogs caromed into mist, ruby entrails gleaming as they died. Still the boar charged forward, flanks ragged from their white-needle teeth. Someone pushed past Redgrain, laughing, and as the Prince of Swine broke free of the pack, this great green figure planted a spear just in time for the beast to hurl itself upon the point. The dogs flowed up again, but the pig drove forward, crimson eyes rolling as the spear-point's metal lugs vanished into its chest. It should have died, but the powerful legs still tore the soil, and it thrust itself along the shaft, lunging with its tusks toward the whitening hands of the green huntsman. Then Redgrain stepped around and brought his sword down two-handed on the creature's neck. Spine and blade both snapped, and the Prince of Swine collapsed. "Well met, stranger!" He clapped Redgrain on his shoulder with bloody hands, towering over him, though Redgrain stood above 6 feet. Then he knelt amid the surf of dogs, produced a wide, round-bladed skinning knife. The dogs licked and whimpered as he began to slash the golden pelt in short, smooth strokes. "And my thanks for thine aid." Redgrain stood back from the carcass, and, not knowing what else to do, tore up a fistful of damp, dead grass and used it to wipe blood from his broken sword. A few of the hounds, they were albinos with red ears and blood-bubble eyes like white rats, began to sniff at the crimson on his fingers. "I'm the one who should thank you," he told the huntsman. "If you hadn't appeared, that boar would have killed me." The huntsman laughed. "I can claim no credit, friend. The Prince of Boars was my quarry, and I hunted him. That is all." The huntsman was a full-blood stranger, dressed in green velvet, rich as moss. His grayish skin was like marble, his eyes a vivid shade of green. "How did you come to be hunting here? On Ithric Hill, of all places." The huntsman laughed once more, boar's blood sluicing around his wrists as he undid the caul of fat beneath the hide. "It is in my nature. This world is full of wild and evil things, and we with power are bound by nature to seek and slaughter what is monstrous." His knife caught, and he wrenched it through. "That is prosperity's cost. Dost disagree?" Redgrain said nothing for a moment. He felt uneasy, unclean. He pictured the Melusine lying there, gutted in the grass. He looked at the pelt of the slaughtered boar, all shot through with yellow gold, like Foster's hair. At length he asked, "How do you determine what is monstrous?" The huntsman grinned up at him. There were drops of blood like berries in his greenish beard. "By way of answer, let me ask thee this. What huntest thou, and when thou find'st it, dost doubt shalt recognize the thing thou camest to kill?" Redgrain folded his arms and glanced up at the crest of Ithric Hill. It was not so far. Something moved up there, he thought. Something slithered. The stranger laughed. "Thy blade is broken, friend." He withdrew a long-edged poniard of rusted bronze from his belt and offered it. The quillions curled like snakes. "Thou dwellst too much on this and that. When thou findest thy quarry, Redgrain, think not too long, but kill, and have done." And Redgrain reached out slowly to accept the gift. Its wire-bound grip was icy in his hand. Night. Twilight lent gray clouds a greenish tinge as he came to the crest of Ithric Hill. He had nothing but a dagger and a torn gambeson. He was hungry and thirsty. So far above the tree line, the wind blew hard, and the low pools of slimy, standing water had a sheen of ice across their face. Hardy shrubs grew here, bent and whorled by the wind, but green and fearsome in the toughness of their stalks. Basalt columns thrust themselves from earth, veering strangely toward the sky. It was like the hill was crowned. Where 2 stands of those pillars grew together, they framed a triangle of darkness leading down into the hill. He'd expected to find sign of the drake, spent pellets, cracked bone, and greenish spoor. But there was no animal reek about the hilltop, only the metal smell of cold, and all he found was a single grey scale cast loose upon the stone. The wind raged. He faced the triangular entrance with poniard in hand, but its cold weight gave no comfort. He'd come too far to turn back, so he tightened his jaw and passed beneath the darkness of the arch. Inside, the cave was full of whirling wind, and many places where the rock grew together or split apart allowed the green light through in shards. There were gleaming flecks of crystal and gold pyrite. It was not so dark inside as he had feared. He climbed down. The columnar basalt formed a winding stair. Strange eddies shook the stale air, but all was clean and cold, all quiet but for the muffled wailing of the wind. No gnawed bones spoilt their rancid marrow on the floor. No scales rustled in the dark, no mutterings obscene lifted from the depths below. Perhaps, he thought, he'd find the grey drake sleeping. Perhaps he'd slide the poniard through its slitted eye. And perhaps it was just waiting in silence to sting him, feast upon his entrails while its poison locked his joints. He descended. Then the hexagon stair opened into a wide chamber in the belly of the hill, dim as the sea-green hall of a drowned castle. And he knew this was the place. Knew it in his bones. There could be no other. The distant walls were lost in dusty gloom. Only the faintest haze of green twilight seeped through lacuna in the stone. He took a slow step forward, listening. Silence. He closed his eyes to focus his hearing. When he opened them again, a yellow gaze stared back from the depths ahead. He fell back, held the knife before him, and a sharp breath's echo mingled with a hiss from deep within the creature's chest. Wings unfurled in the dark, and the white teeth flashed beneath the yellow eyes. He took hold of his fear. The cold wind billowed down the stair, and he let it bear him, circling to the left. For each step forward, the drake's shadow thickened. For each step clockwise, the drake kept counterclockwise time. The last green twilight dimmed, and shadows leaped forward from the cave walls. But hunter and prey were close at hand. Through the gloom, he could now discern clawed knuckles on the floor, sharp veins of wings, and rows of spines upon the arching back. The grey drake's scales were dull as iron, but fine and meshed as any lizard's when they caught the dying light. The head, primeval, teeth like spikes, and crowned with back-swept spiral horns. Despite the chill, his palms were sweating. He changed his grip on the knife, putting the point below his fist so he'd have more power to punch through scale. The drake parted its jaws in response. Silvery slaver trailed in the cave-floor dust. They shifted closer by inches in the murk, testing the measure between them, until they were near enough that it could feel his warmth, and he its cold. Then they both fell still, all energies gathered, bunched, and ready for release. Silence in the cave. Then the wind blew. Both struck at the same time. At each blow perfect, fangs and dagger both flashed out toward the join of throat and neck. But then Redgrain's knife point struck the air with such force that its tip shattered, and the broken edge skated down and escaped his grasp. He fell back in dismay. On the other side of the cool surface, the grey drake recoiled, hissing soundlessly. For a moment, each stared at the other, and then approached the glass slowly. Redgrain raised one hand to brush the cool surface with his fingers. The drake's talon scored the other side, its touch making no sound. A sense of horror boiled up inside the young knight, and this time he couldn't seize the feeling and force it down. He ran hands across the surface in the air. Not glass, he realized. Obsidian, a dark wall of perfect shadowed sheen. Volcanic basalt, chthonic glass. Flecks of pyrite glimmered in its depth like sunbeam motes. He pounded his fist against the smooth black stone, and from its dull sound he knew that it was solid. No transparent pane of glass, but a dark mirror. "What you're looking for," she'd said. "You'll find it up on Ithric Hill." He fell back from the black wall and screwed his eyes shut tight. When he looked again, the drake was gone. Only his own dark twin faced him from the shadows, yellow gleaming in the darkness of his eyes. The Wrong Station is made possible with the generous support of our listeners on Patreon. Join us today at patreon.com/The Wrong Station for bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes content, ad-free listening, and additional goodies celebrating our decade of dread. Today's episode, The Hunting of the Grey Drake, was written by Alexander Saxton and performed by Anthony Botelho. Thank you to Coffee Gnome 413, Kevin L. Nant, Jordan S., Adrienne Loeb, Christiane Kane, Asher, Vagrant Child, Murray, Red Hill Bones, Abby Wilson, Michelle Dunat, Aaron Andrews, Andrew Taylor, John Yeagerline, Ken Takayezu, and Brucatini for helping us keep the lights, well, off. The Wrong Station is co-produced by Alexander Saxton, Anthony Botelho, and Jacob Duarte Spiel, with music composed and performed by Alon Citrin, and arranged for the viola and performed by Viola Schmidt. You can follow us on social media at The Wrong Station, or email us at thewrongstation@gmail.com. And until next time, thank you for listening.